This is part 2 of the independence movement video. Like I mentioned in the previous video, we're going to be focusing on the country of India and the continent of Africa, and we're going to look at the nonviolent movements that were done to gain independence. So first, let's look at India. Here is a map of India. We're going to talk about 3 important people that were part of India's independent movement. And first is Gandhi. Here's a picture of Gandhi right here. Gandhi uses nonviolence, and this nonviolent movement is used later by many civil rights leaders such as Dr. Martin Luther King. But nonviolence was used in order to gain freedom from Britain. Britain controlled India. The Indians didn't like that. So Gandhi would use a lot of nonviolent movements and civil disobedience, which means boycotting things and doing everything with nonviolence. However, every time they would do nonviolent movements, they were always met with violence by the British government. The British government literally beat these people as they were marching peacefully and so on and so forth. Gandhi would go on many hunger strikes, and a lot of his people would go on hunger strikes as well. The most famous of his strikes was called the Salt March. Gandhi got a lot of people together and they marched to the sea to collect salt. Why is this important? Well, the Indians had to buy salt from England. So Gandhi said, let's not support this government which controls us, this other country. Let's just make our own salt. And this was a way to show these people in England that, hey, we're not going to take your stuff anymore. We're going to be our own country. During his many nonviolent protests, there was a Amritsar massacre, and many innocent women, children, men were killed in a peaceful demonstration by the British soldiers because they fired into the crowd. Well, World War II comes to an end, and India becomes independent right around 1947, 1948. Gandhi wins, but there's a split within his own movement. And it's a split between the Indian Muslims and the Hindu Indians. And Gandhi is assassinated by his own people because Gandhi goes in a direction that the Hindus don't feel is right for their country. So he is assassinated in 1948. Another important character in this story of India's independence, Jawaharlal Nehru. Nehru was Gandhi's right-hand man. He was by Gandhi's side the whole time. He was from India. He went to England and was educated, just like Gandhi. And he helped out in all the non-violent movements to gain independence for India. He was the first prime minister or leader of India after India gains independence. And he was in office until he died in 1964. Another important leader is Muhammad Ali Jinnah. This guy is really important too. He is also a Indian. However, he is a Muslim Indian. He also went to England, was educated, and he also worked with Gandhi to gain independence for India. However, after Gandhi's death and after India gains independence, the Muslims do not want to live with the Hindus and vice versa. So all the Muslims leave India and they create their own country called Pakistan. Pakistan is a completely Muslim country, and Jinnah was the first ruler of Pakistan. Now we're going to go to Africa, and we're going to focus on 3 countries that also practice nonviolence and how they became independent countries. Here is a map of the continent of Africa. We're going to focus on 3 countries. Ghana right here, Kenya, which is right here, and South Africa down here. First, let's focus on Ghana. So in Ghana, we have Kwame Nkrumah. Kwame wanted independence for his people, for the country of Ghana. Ghana was controlled by the British, and they would extract a lot of gold and all these other resources from this country, and the country was left poor. The country wouldn't see any of this money that the British would just take. So Kwame said, we want to be our own country, we want to be free, we don't want to be under your rule anymore. So he led a lot of nonviolent movements because he followed Gandhi's model, and he practiced civil disobedience once again, and eventually Ghana becomes their own country and they become free. Next is Kenya. In Kenya, we have Jomo Kenyatta. Jomo wanted freedom for his country as well. Again, the British controlled Kenya, and they exploited the resources from Kenya as well. Jomo said, no, we don't want this. We're going to use nonviolence, and they did. Great Britain didn't like this guy. They threw him in jail, and he was trying to get independence, and the British didn't like it. And eventually he gets it, and he rules his country for a short time. Again, another country, they use nonviolence, and they get what they want. The last country we're going to focus on is South Africa. In South Africa, one of the most famous African leaders or nationalists was a guy named Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela. And there's a picture of him right here. This guy was from South Africa. He was educated, very smart man. And during the time when he lived, Africa was separate. The white people that lived in Africa were called Afrikaners. And there was the system called apartheid put into place, which separated the upper white people and the lower black people. They wanted to keep races separate, but all the black people were remaining poor because the Afrikaners wanted to keep it that way. Mandela wanted equal rights for Africans, for black Africans, to say we want voting rights, we want equal housing rights, we want everything you white people have. So he led a movement against apartheid. The British government didn't like it, so they imprisoned him, and he was in jail for about 27 years. He finally gets out in the early 1990s, and he is freed, and he becomes the new leader of South Africa, because South Africa finally becomes an independent country, and he becomes the ruler for a long time. This is it for the independence movement presentation. All these countries gain their independence through one way or another, but they all want the freedom. And these are just very, very small group of examples. There are plenty more around the world.